get started here. This is super quick, and we'll dig in and have some time for questions at the end. About me, my name is Jay Gamblin. You can just call me a vulnerability enthusiast. That's kind of my unofficial title. I run two websites that you guys might like to look at. One of them is cve.icu. What it'll do is it'll give you how many CVEs are published daily, weekly, help you kind of break down. So if you have to write any reports and push those reports up to your management, I built this site specifically for people to be able to go and grab data level graphics for their reports. I also run a website called patchthis.app. What it does is it gives you a list of vulnerabilities on your network that you should be investigating. We'll get to both of those a little bit later in the talk. I'm a member of the EPSS, the Exploit Prediction Scoring System SIG, so I sit on those board meetings and I sit in their planning meetings and I help kind of guide where the EPSS goes. I'm not special in any way, and that is an open SIG, so if you're interested in data science or vulnerability management, you can sign up for that SIG on first.org. We'd love to have more people, especially people who are not in industry, in that SIG. So if you do vulnerability management in your day job, we would love to have you join the SIG. We just have a new co-chair of the SIG who runs vulnerability management at Peloton. So we're really trying to be more focused on the community. I'm also on the CVE SIG members, so I spend a lot of time working with the quality working group for CVE data, and if you know CVE data, you know that that's a hard group to be on. And I'm also on the automated working group, which helps companies and individuals process CVE data at scale because it's so large. Feel free to contact me at either on X or email me. Or I have a bunch, I have 20 years worth of CVE scripts and data on my GitHub website that's completely free. So let's talk about the vulnerability reality here. The problem is there are 110 CVEs roughly published per day this year. Organizations do not know what to remediate first. When I started doing vulnerability management 20 years ago for the government, there were 18 CVEs a day. It was my job basically to read all 18 CVE descriptions and say, yeah, we have this, no, I've never heard of this, right? One person could do it, and it wasn't a big deal. We're way past that now. We're in the age of you need machine learning and some algorithms to help you figure out what to patch. Many organizations use the CVSS score to determine what to publish because PCI tells them they have to. I will tell you right now, that is a misuse of the CVSS scoring system. Their SIG would want me to tell you, do not use CVSS to determine what to patch on your network. That's not what it's built for, that's not how it's designed, and that's not how you're supposed to use it. The solution is, people are moving to patching known exploitable CVEs first, and that's the only way to do it. I'm lucky enough to have been part of a startup that was acquired by Cisco that built the first vulnerability management program that looked at what was exploitable and kind of helped companies patch that. So here are the number of CVEs published per day this year. And you guys don't have to grab pictures of the screen all the time if you don't want to. I know it's handy, but I will tweet a link to this PDF deck right after the talk. So if you want the data, you don't have to screenshot it. Yeah, we're over 100 CVEs a day, but at least 2 times a week, we get 250 new CVEs a day. That's normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if you ever wonder why your vulnerability management people look so stressed on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's because their workload about doubled that week. So here's the CVEs per year. We've had 2 pretty big events here that's kind of changed the trajectory of CVEs and how they're published. In 2016, they opened up the CNA process, which allowed companies to directly publish CVEs to the CVE list, right? So if you're Microsoft or you're just even Joe's software shop, you could take control of what CVEs got published for your list. That really took us up. In 2020, something else happened. Does anybody have a guess what happened in 2020? COVID, but Also, GitHub. GitHub became a CNA in that time and started really pushing hard on publishing CVEs for all open source source code that's on their network, right? In their repo. So they shot to the top of the CNA list really quick. So now we have much more CVEs, and a lot of them you'll never see on your network, right? Therefore, some code somebody wrote one time, and somebody found a CVE in it, and it just sits there, right? So it's just noise. So let's talk about what EPS is. EPSS stands for Exploit Prediction Scoring System. I just realized I didn't put this in the slide deck, and I'm sorry about that. So EPSS is a data-driven estimating the likelihood that any CVE on the CVE list will be exploited in the next 30 days. So that's a sliding 30-day windows. So every night at midnight we run the model. It shoots out a new score for the CVEs and publishes it. So what I really want to lean into here is if you do want to use EPSS, it's not a grab it one time and this is my list. You really have to build it into your process so that you grab it every night. It's normally done by 3:30 Eastern. So whatever time zone that is for you, is you should grab it after 4 a.m. Eastern US time, and it'll be updated for that day. EPSS is managed under FIRST. I was lucky enough to work at Kena Security, like I mentioned earlier. We gave them the patent for EPSS to use, and they now manage that as a nonprofit as part of our acquisition into the Cisco systems. The score is used everywhere. If you use vulnerability management software, over 100 known vulnerability management software tools has the EPSS score built into either algorithm or they display it on their website in some way. There's a list on the website that you can see if you're using it already. So the EPSS data provides two data sets. It's a really simple data set. It's a 3-column CSV. The first column is the CVE number. The second column is the EPSS score. And then the third column, because people ask for it, is what percentage of the CVEs this is, right? It's just a base percentile number. I pulled these numbers today. The high scoring CVE is a Cisco CVE from 2019 for a gigabit interface router. The mean score is only 0.04, and the low score is 0.0004. So that is shared by 7,000 CVEs. That's the floor CVE number. That's what you get. That's the score you get if you're a CVE at all. So this is what the EPSS scores look like spread out over a graph, right? We tell people all the time that you have to figure out what your comfort level is and what to do, right? So here's the graph we always show people and say, if you're trying to patch everything, you're going to lose. If you want to use EPSS in your patching system, we tell people to start at a minimum of 0.5, and it breaks that down to here. Today, there were 5,671 CVEs that the model predicts will be exploited in the next 30 days. So that's much more manageable for people to use, right? So the data's there, and the data is doing what we want the data to do. It's kind of an odd thought to think that we want to weed out 95, 98% of all CVEs, but that is the goal of the EPSS project, is to say that here are the CVEs that we have high expectation to be exploited in the next 30 days in the wild. I will start this slide by saying I am not a data scientist, so if you want to talk to our data scientist, Jay Jacobs runs the data science program, and he'll be happy to dig into the geek stuff with you there and the math. But when they built V3 and released it in 2023, we saw an 82% increase over the V2 model. So that was really good. And we're looking again, and we'll release a new model in the fall, and the V4, and we really think that we're going to get about another 80% increase in efficiency again. So it's really, the model is really starting to shape up and be hard to defeat in what it does, in predicting what CVEs are going to be exploited in the next 30 days. So the data sources used in CVE, in EPSS, is pretty interesting. We work with a lot of companies in the threat space and in the technology space, and they give us their data for free, and we give them back the EPSS score to the community. That's the working agreement we have with them. But we bring in probably 2,500 variables at the end of the day to calculate these scores. There's a white paper that you can go read that talks about how to use EPSS for vulnerability scoring and get into all the math if you need it. So let's just talk about what you guys are here for, using EPSS for vulnerability management. So this is a warning. EPSS is not a one-size-fits-all thing, right? We think that when we do it, we look at what an average network is, and we say, and we build the model against an average corporate network. If your network is different, we would suggest that you do all the testing and all the research and understand. We're not testing it. We're not a hospital network, so we don't have that kind of stuff sitting around. So we're not an IoT network. We're not an OT network. So if you guys have IoT, OT, or healthcare stuff on there, this might not be the model for you because it doesn't weigh heavily in there. We would love to talk to you guys about that though, especially if you're interested in building a healthcare specific or an OT specific model of EPSS so that we could lean in and say, here's EPSS for OT providers, here's EPSS for healthcare providers. So the best way to use EPSS for VM is to understand that it's for network-based attacks because of where we get the data and how CVEs are weighted. This model is heavily for network attacks. So if you have a network that you let students connect to, or that you have a big corporate network, this is the model to use because those are the vulnerabilities and the exploits that we can detect, and are probably 99% of the exploits that people see in the wild. There are very few keyboard hackers these days, right? Like I have to be in front of the machine to make this exploit work. So this model understands that and has been built back to use network-based attacks as its primary scores. EPSS should only be used primarily after all known exploited vulnerabilities are off your network. Well, let me say that again. EPSS should only be used as a primary source of information after you removed all exploited known vulnerabilities from your network. How many people have removed all known exploited vulnerabilities from their network? Yeah, so there are very few people who have done that. I love for people to use EPSS in deciding what to patch, but EPSS does not stop and does not pivot away from fixing stuff on your network that you know bad guys are attacking now. In some point, when we get to a point where everybody has all the known exploited vulnerabilities patched, then EPSS is a superstar, right? Because then you're just patching what you think the bad guys are doing. But 99.9% of us right now have vulnerabilities on our network that you can go to GitHub and find an exploit for and run it against it, right? There's a super in-depth guide that we just built on EPSS at risk-based prioritization.github.io that sits you all through this. We worked with Yahoo, Microsoft, and a couple other companies that gave us data on the vulnerabilities on their network to kind of help build out a model to show you what it would look like if you deployed EPSS on there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time digging into that today because our time is so short, but I would suggest that you go there and look at that. I've also built patchthis.app, which isn't the primary focus of this call, but if you do not have a threat intelligence program today, I take what 80% of all threat intelligence platforms are built on, put it in a CSV, and give it to everybody for free every night. What it does is it goes out and checks what hackers, what quote-unquote bad guys are using to exploit networks, combines that together, breaks it down, and gives you a list of about 6,000 CVEs that we know are being actively used to exploit networks. So if you need a place to start and a place to look, I suggest this. I'm happy to take any pull requests or any information you guys have on this site too, as it's one of my side projects that I'm really into. So EPSS and the deployment pipelines. This is where it gets interesting, especially for Sec and DevOps people. EPSS is built to be ran this way, and a lot of tools already have it built in. If you use any of the major code repositories, either GitLab or GitHub, it's both built into their scanning already. So when it finds a CVE in your code, it will tell you that, hey, here's the CVE, here's the EPSS score, here's the CVSS score. So I would really suggest that if you dev on one of those, if that's one of the places where you keep your dev tools, that you enable both EPSS on both GitLab and GitHub. There's also a GitHub action that I love to have people use, especially if you're using Kubernetes or Docker in your environment, because what it does is it uses an open source program, either Trivy or something along those lines, to scan your Docker container files and your development files for known vulnerabilities. It will then go in and run EPS against it, and you can set a threshold. Like if it's above a 0.6 in EPSS, please do not let this push to prod, so that your teams can go back and fix that. It's super simple. I'm super proud of the team that's built that. It actually made the main GitHub advanced security toolkit, so it's built into what GitHub tries to use internally and tries to have their best customers use. Here's a little screenshot of what that looks like. And with that, I am done.